Thank you very much. Let us share screen. Mm-hmm. Okay. If you do not see a document that says meditation, Judaism, and self-mastery, then let me know. Otherwise, I'll assume you see it. Okay. So what are we going to do today? Today, we're going to continue our deep dive on meditation and self-mastery. The works we will review include Meditation and Remolding the Self by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, which we went over last week. We're going to review Mesilat Yesharim, The Path of the Just by the Ramchal today. And we're going to incorporate the essay by Dr. Maxwell Maltz in Psycho-Cybernetics called How to Awaken the Automatic Success Mechanism Within You. And you will see how all these studies point to the same thing, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And we'll continue learning about meditation in everyday life by concentrating on all activities. So as a reminder, we have before talked about working on yourself when we talked about the meditation of Ruach HaKodesh, or the Jewish version of enlightenment, transcending the physical through work on yourself. And we went over Rabbi Kaplan's essay on that. Now we're going to take some of the same points that were made and do a deep dive on them. Okay. Just as a short review, if you recall from last week, Rabbi Kaplan made a number of really important points when it comes to understanding the relevance of meditation in general, and this meditation in particular, meditation to improve yourself. He mentioned the Musar movement, and what was fascinating about the Musar movement was that on the one hand, the Musar movement encouraged self-improvement in ways that we typically hold to be important, developing midot, developing personality characteristics. But at the same time, the Musar movement, as he described, emphasized personal effectiveness, goal setting, time management, setting priorities, all this human relations stuff that has been going on in industry and elsewhere for decades. That was part of the Musar movement, personal effectiveness. So that is remarkable. And it's a program, it was a program for self-perfection. And Rabbi Kaplan did mention that the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Lozado, was a big proponent of self-perfection, of Musar, which we're going to go over. Okay. And the Musar practice incorporated daily activities to get you better. And actually talked about using mantra meditation, working on a specific skill that you wanted to develop a month at a time. And the repetition of doing so would ingrain that skill within you. And what's very interesting, as we pointed out, is that this relates to the analysis by Maxwell Maltz and Psycho-Cybernetics of how people develop a self-image, how they develop into a somebody. Maxwell Maltz pointed out that repetition, the opinion of an authority figure, and a high impact event all helped you form a self-image. Okay, you emerge after one of those, that combination or an isolation of those three, as a certain person. Okay. So here we are with the Musar school telling us that if we repeat certain things on a regular basis, let's say 30 days, then that becomes ingrained in us. They're using the method of repetition that Maxwell Maltz is describing. So if through repetition you develop a bad habit, through repetition you can develop a good habit. And the Musar people said something, Rabbi Kaplan said something also very interesting, which we'll have to wrestle with as we go along. He said you can actually speak to your body, and your body intelligence will respond in the form of, okay, mouth, don't eat a second piece of cake, that kind of thing. And you're giving operational instructions to your mouth, and your mouth will have a reaction. There's an intelligence in your being that is programmed so that when you reach for that second piece of cake, your mouth's like, wait a minute, I'm not going to open for that guy because he just programmed me to not do it. So this is really cool. And this is something that Dr. Maltz is going to get into further. So that's what we're talking about. That's what Rabbi Kaplan reviewed last week. So today we're going to take more of a deeper dive into the Ramchal and Mesilat Yesharim, which Rabbi Kaplan mentioned, and see if we can get some kind of understanding of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing this now. Let's see if I can make this work. Go to the desktop. Excuse me. See if I can get this here. Okay. If you do not see a document that says Path of the Just, Mesilat Yesharim with select commentaries, then raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll assume you see it. Okay. Okay. So this is an overview of this study, which we're going to review in dafyomi.com. It actually is a really good one. Okay. And before we get into it, let's talk about the qualifiers. I'm not an expert in this. I have gone through a bunch of it. Actually, there was a time when Gil and I were learning it together. And, excuse me, one second, important message. I just thought. Sue Ellen wanted to be here. She's with Darren. Unfortunately, she's in the hospital with her mom. Her mom had to be taken to the emergency room. So that's why she's not here. And I wanted to mention that to everybody so we can pray for the family. And when I said to Sue Ellen, what is the Hebrew name? She said it's Hinda Pesha, Yiddish. Doesn't know any Hebrew, but I guarantee you that if you pray to Hakadosh Baruch Hu on behalf of Sue Ellen's mother, he will know who you're talking about. So please keep them in mind, and we will dedicate this learning to her mom and to the whole family. May they have strength and a speedy recovery. Okay. All right, Mesilat Yesharim. So I'm acquainted with it, and I've tasted its dynamism and its truth. I want to make the point that the Ramchal was a highly elevated individual of a high spiritual consciousness, and his point of view is of the world in a very metaphysical level. Remember that, as Rabbi Kaplan said, when you work on yourself, at some point you go through different levels and you so-called transcend the physical, whatever that means. Well, that's the point of view of the Ramchal. He definitely has that take on it. And I and we are not positioned to really tackle that with any thoroughness, but that's okay. And the reason why that's okay is because the principles and the methods that he's describing apply as much at a lower level of function as they do at a higher level of function, meaning you could be thinking about the spacious thoughts and the 10th level of heaven, or you could operate in the first or second level, like we all are. And the same methods and the same truths apply. So I don't have a problem going over this because it will still be relevant to us as we operate at the lower levels. And hopefully, as we keep learning, we'll get higher and higher and we'll be able to appreciate these truths from a higher position. Okay. The most popular and the Daf Yomi describes Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lozado as a master Kabbalist, and you can see automatically he has a very metaphysical take on things. And the most popular Musar, or ethical work in Jewish literature, is what we're going to learn. And remember, as Rabbi Kaplan points out, even though the Musar movement is associated primarily with ethical conduct, he did make mention of the fact that personal effectiveness is equally important. You become a better at what you do type of person, more functional, more high functioning, in addition to having proper midot. Okay, that's one thing that really appeals to me. Okay. The Gaon of Vilna said, who was himself a master Kabbalist, said of the Ramchal after reading what we're going to do, Mesilat Yesharim, that if Rabbi Lozado was still alive, the Vilna Gaon came after the Ramchal, but if the Ramchal was still alive when the Gaon was living, the Vilna Gaon would have walked by foot from Vilna to Italy to learn from him. That, let me tell you, is quite a reference. Okay. And the Ramchal himself said in another text, I will keep my words few, otherwise the burden will be heavy on the writer and on the reader, just that you should not read over the words as one who treads a clear path, but rather that you think and contemplate very deeply after each and every step, for only then will you succeed. Okay, he's telling us, go slow, make it meaningful, don't rush through this. No speed learning. Because he's putting a bunch of truth into each word and phrase, and we should go at a pace where we try to appreciate that at whatever level we're functioning at. Okay. And the Volzhiner Rebbe said that the Mesilat Yesharim is his roadmap for life, and that somebody should review it constantly. Repetition meditation. The Volzhiner Rebbe says that you use repetition meditation to digest the truths of what the Ramchal has said. And the commentary here goes on to say, let me just get rid of this here. Okay. The commentary here from dafyomi.com says, at first the book may seem simple, but really the more a person matures and grows in understanding, the more he will see wonders in depth and breadth in the Mesilat Yesharim. Okay. So they're anticipating that we're going to review this on a regular basis, and that as our understanding of truth gets more advanced and deeper, we're going to get more meaning out of the reading. That's why I'm willing to start at ground zero here and get what we can out of it. And as we keep learning from the Ramchal, as we keep learning from Rabbi Kaplan and other sources, we can go back to it and say, that's right, I see this now. That is certainly the approach we should take with Tanakh, and it's certainly the approach you should take with wisdom from people like the Ramchal. All right, so here, just to wrap up on this introduction, another Kabbalist who I'm not familiar with, Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, says, those who delve deeply and proficiently in the works of the Ramchal know that his primary aspiration in his books was to clarify the details of the secrets of Atzilut, written in the esoteric spiritual language. Okay, so he's basically saying that the in his understanding, the primary motivation of the Ramchal to write this was for us to understand mysticism, to understand truth from a mystical perspective. That very well may be. But as the Ramchal himself said, he tried to embody each word and phrase with meaning. So what that says to me, that if you can make it understandable from here and you do it the right way, you can make it understandable from here. Okay, so that means that we should be able to understand it now. And then when we all become mystical Kabbalists, we'll get more out of it. Okay. And he's given his credentials about how he did the research and looking at different translations and different institutes and different publications. Good stuff. Okay. And here's the credentials of the person that translated, Rabbi Yosef Sabag. He's got a good resume. And the link to this document is obviously in the document, in the notes from this class, and you can look for yourself. So now let's go to the next segment on this. Go. Good. Okay. If you cannot see a document that says author's introduction, raise your hand. Okay. Okay. This is the introduction from the Ramchal, with commentary from the translated Rabbi Sebag. Okay. Okay. What does the Ramchal say? And again, you will have a link to this document that has the original Hebrew. Okay. The Ramchal says, I have composed this work not to teach people what they do not know, but to remind them of what they already know and which is very familiar to them. For you will find in most of my words only things which most people already know and do not have any doubt about. Okay. He's basically saying, that's a very Ramchal point of view. He's basically saying, people go through the motions. People say they know this stuff, but they don't really know it because they haven't gone deep with it. They haven't probed it. Okay. So he's kind of like, in a very menschlich way, basically saying, hey guys, the stuff that you think you know well and good, but you got to really know it. And that's why I wrote this book, to help ring your bell and help you. So that's what I'm thinking. Okay. So that's what it's meant. Okay. He's kind of challenging the notion that we should have a superficial knowledge of the way the world works. He says, no, we got to go deep. Okay. And he says, yeah, people kind of accept general principles, but they need the details. They need clarification and elucidation. Okay. All right. But according to their familiarity and to the extent that their truth is evident to all, so too is their neglect very prevalent and forgetfulness of them very great. He says, one of the problems is that people forget what they know too. Okay, so he's saying, so I'm reminding you that you don't just read this once. You have to engage in review and diligent study. Okay. And the translator and commentator makes a very interesting analogy. He says, he's quoting so just as a reminder, this Rabbi Sebag, and who's the commentator and translator, went to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 sources to get insights and commentary on what the Ramchal wrote. This man did his homework. Okay, so here, quoting one of the sources, he's saying, like we see in the healing of the body, namely that one must take the medicine repeatedly for a certain amount of time, and only then will he be cured with God's help, so too in the healing of the soul, which is what we're learning. One must return and review the matters in order to intensify the influence of the study upon the soul, so that it is not merely attaining knowledge. Just like, the doctor says, take the antibiotics for 7 days, whatever it is, you got to take Torah for 7 years. You got to go through this stuff. Okay. And repetition is the key to not forgetting. Back to the Ramchal. If you reflect on the current state of affairs in most of the world, you will see most people of quick intelligence and sharp mentality devote most of their thought and interest in the subtleties of wisdom and the depths of analysis, every man according to his intellectual tendency and natural desire. There are those who toil greatly in studying the creation and nature. Others devote all their study to astronomy and mathematics or to the arts. There are others which enter closer towards the sacred, namely the study of Holy Torah. Among those, some occupy themselves with halachic analysis, others with medrash, others with legal decisions. Okay, so there's a wide diversity of people learning a bunch of different things. Okay. And he's mentioning these people all have something in common. They have an intellectual soul within this, which is striving for truth. Okay, so where's the best place to find that truth? Okay, and when you find that truth, like the people who are learning Torah, as he mentions, and what the Ramchal is professing is certainly Torah. Once you profess that, what do you do with it? Okay. Few are those which devote thought and study to the matter of perfection of divine service, on love, fear, clinging, and the other branches of piety. This is not because they do not consider these things as fundamental, for if you ask them, each one will answer you that this is of utmost importance and that it is unimaginable for one to be considered truly wise if he does not fully comprehend these matters. Rather, their lack of devoting more attention to it stems from its being so familiar and so evident to them that they see no need for spending much time on it. He's pointing out that people who just use it as book knowledge miss the boat because you need to become more pious with the knowledge. You need to take the next step on making sure that you love, fear, clinging, and all the intense cognitive functions that comes with piety. That's what your focus is. Just like as Bhante says, you sit on the cushion and develop mindfulness and the skill of focusing on something. You got to get off the cushion and apply it in everyday life. And similarly, if you're going to be somebody who's going to study Torah as we are, you've got to emerge from it a better person. That's the point here. Okay. And they're too familiar with it. Again, when he says too familiar with it, he's kind of saying, it's because they're just using it for knowledge's sake. We got to apply that knowledge in an effort to become better people. On the other hand, you have people that are studying and reading books that are not necessarily doing it out of intellectual pursuit. They're kind of doing it, it's their job. They feel like, well, I'm just going to show up at a shiur and just sit there and get credit for showing up. So he goes, that's a problem. We have people who really do get it but don't apply it. We have people that are putting in the time, they could be applying it, but they're not really getting it. So he wants to fix this. So what happened? What do we end up with in the Jewish so-called religious world? The situation has reached the point where most people imagine piety consists of reciting many psalms, very long confessions, difficult fasts, and immersions in ice water and snow, maybe not in New Jersey or Arizona, but I'm sure elsewhere at this time in the 1700s. All are things incompatible with intellect and which reason cannot be at peace. So he's making a commentary that this is the Jewish world we end up with if we're not able to take a deep dive and really digest this stuff. Okay. Although the beginnings and foundations of piety are already implanted in every upright person's heart, nevertheless, if he does not engage himself in their study, he will encounter its branches but won't recognize them, and he will tread over them without perceiving that he's doing so. Really interesting point. He's saying the beginnings and foundations of piety are inside of us. Okay. And if we engage in diligent, repetitive study, then we will be able to unearth that, get in touch with that. To me, I'm just thinking of Ethan Dorshav and his remarks and his analysis of the structure of the soul. And to me, I bet you Ethan would call that the neshama. But we'll see. We will see. But he says, observe that matters of piety and fear and love of God and purity of heart are not things innately implanted in a person whereby he would not need means to acquire them, such as sleep and wakefulness, hunger and satiation, and all other responses naturally implanted in our nature. Rather, certainly it is necessary to employ means and strategies to acquire them. He's saying, even though we have the potential to have fear and love of God and cleave to Him, we have to work. We need a structure for developing that. It's not a natural thing where if we're hungry, we eat. If we're tired, we sleep. When we're tired, we just fall asleep. When we're hungry, we eat. When we're thirsty, we drink. He's saying, yeah, but on a higher level, when it comes to becoming a pious person, it's not a natural thing. You got to work at it. Okay. Okay. And he gives a little bit of an admonition. What will we answer on the day of rebuke if we have been lax in this study and forsaken that which is so incumbent on us as to be the main thing which the Lord our God requires of us? So him being him, with the perspective that he has, he's kind of warning us to say, if you neglect this and you finally meet your maker, in essence, you're going to say, you didn't open the books, or you just opened them once. Why don't you keep with it? Okay. Maybe he knows a little something about what happens when we meet our maker that we should bear in mind. And from a practical matter, how can we cleave to God if we don't study his greatness and exaltedness and make our heart want to cleave? How can we purify our thoughts if we don't exert ourselves to cleanse it from imperfections? Does that ring a bell? Can anybody say the word controlling your thoughts? Can anybody say that's meditation, the purpose of meditation? He's basically putting in the most fantastic argument to do meditation. He's saying, if you want to become a better person and engage in self-perfection, you've got to have the skills to think and say and do this as opposed to that. You've got to exercise the choice and not let the thoughts and impulses run away with you. Meditation. Okay. Let's just see if there's anything else we should use to wrap up. Okay. So then he's saying, On the basis of this Baraita, he's quoting the Baraita from, I guess I'm not sure where he's getting it from. But in any event, he's saying, why did I do this? I have undertaken to compose this work to teach myself and to remind others the conditions of perfect service according to their proper levels. I will clarify the nature of each of them, its divisions and details, the way to acquire it, its detrimental factors, and the way to guard against them, so that I and whoever else finds it pleasing may read it in order to learn to fear the Lord our God and not forget our duty to him. What the natural physicality exerts itself to remove from our hearts, the reading and reflecting will remind us and awaken us to that which we have been commanded. So he's basically saying, if we do this study, then what's going to happen is we'll be able to, as he says, remove the physicality from our hearts. What he's talking about is all these impulses and inclinations which will interfere with us, excuse me, aspiring to higher levels. We can control them. This man is basically saying we're going to be able to develop a meditative skill to 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 give ourselves the knowledge and use the knowledge to raise ourselves up. Okay, can't do it without meditation. Okay. And lo and behold, who is this author quoting but Rabbi Kaplan in the Meditation in the Bible, talking about becoming a better person and achieving enlightenment, or as we say, Ruach HaKodesh. And this is what Rabbi Kaplan said in Meditation and the Bible, which we went over. How do you like that? So this commentator and translator is bringing us right back to Rabbi Kaplan, talking about we developed the midot of Torah study, carefulness, diligence, cleanliness, abstention, purity, piety, humility, fear of sin, and holiness. Once you do this, you pass go, you collect your $200, and you win the Monopoly game. Okay, so that's the introduction. We will get into the bread and butter. Same bat time, same bat channel next week. Now, let's view a little bit about practical meditation. So now we go to this. Okay. Let's get this thing back over here. Concentration on all activities. Okay. We'll go over this a little bit before we meditate. What does Bhante say? We are right here. You should try to maintain mindfulness of every activity and perception through the day, starting with the first perception when you awake and ending with the last thought before you fall asleep. This is an incredibly tall goal to shoot for. Don't expect to be able to achieve this work soon. Just take it slowly and let your abilities grow over time. The most feasible way to go about the task is to divide your day up into chunks. Dedicate a certain interval to mindfulness of posture, then extend this mindfulness to other simple activities, eating, washing, dressing, and so forth. Sometime during the day, you can set aside 15 minutes or so to practice the observation of specific types of mental states, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feelings, or the hindrances or thoughts. The specific routine is up to you. The idea is to get practice at spotting the various items and to preserve your state of mindfulness as fully as you can throughout the day. This one suggestion makes our learning with Bhante all worthwhile. as he's saying, if you're up for 16 hours during the day, whatever it is, or 18 hours, it's really hard to remain mindful for 16 hours straight. So you put it into manageable chunks. You can say, all right, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to be mindful of what I do when I eat. I'm going to be mindful of what I do when I dress. I'm going to be mindful of what I do when I talk to people. I'm going to be mindful of, I'm going to sit down on the cushion and be mindful of what my emotions are. You pick a target, a specific focus, and you're mindful of that. I'm going to be mindful when I go into stores. So so then you have like on and off times. You're sure to be mindful about how when you go into Walmart or Walgreens, whatever it is, and you're going to interact with everybody, you go to the shelf. Okay, then that session's over when you exit Walgreens, and okay, you can be mindful after that, but you're not on duty anymore. This is a really great idea. I'm going to be mindful when I go to meditation class. I'm going to be mindful when I interact with teachers. Okay, on and on and on. I'm going to be mindful when I go to shul. So you take a dedicated time to be mindful and just become aware of what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and develop your mindfulness. And it'll probably just carry over a little bit into the next segment of your day. This is a wonderful technique. You're breaking it up into bite-sized pieces. And if you want, you can take a week and say, this week, I'm going to be mindful of myself eating. The week after, I'm going to be mindful of myself driving. And the week after, I'm going to be mindful of myself shopping. You pick it. So this is a really good way to develop mindfulness. You develop the skill, number one, the skill in general. And number two, you're programming yourself to become more mindful when you eat, when you shop, and so on, so that it becomes a little bit of an automatic thing. And the next time you eat after this week, you'll automatically become a little mindful because you program yourself to do it. Good job, Bhante. Okay, we're going to stop on that nugget so we can meditate. This is a man who knows what he's doing, I tell you. So now, no excuses. Everybody can become mindful. You can say, even tomorrow, if you just say, I'm going to be mindful when I eat breakfast and lunch. What are we talking about there? A half hour of time? Okay. Okay. Margaret, if you please.